this. Lions never had a lair like this.
We are talking about 1996's The Ghost and the Darkness. This one is directed by Stephen Hopkins and stars Michael Douglas, Val Kilmer and Tom Wilkinson. Actually based on a true story, this one. And it's one of these kind of creature animal attack movies that doesn't really get spoken about much these days. It was described when it came out as Jaws in the Grasslands. But if you're unfamiliar with the story, what's it about? Well, at the end of the 19th century, we have this Irish character, engineer, played by Val Kilmer. He is sent to try and oversee the construction of this bridge in this particular part of Africa. And whilst he is there, there are a rash of lion attacks that are killing the workers. And by all accounts, on the actual report, there was anywhere from 30 to 140 people killed by these lions. And there are actually two male lions. Now, what made this case so interesting was that these lions weren't acting like typical lions. I mean, there was two male lions hunting together, which is unusual. And they seemed to specifically target humans. And if the movie didn't to go for, they were sort of not just killing to eat. They were just killing for the sake of killing. Now, obviously, the movie does take liberties with the true event. For example, Michael Douglas' character is a work of fiction. So his character was completely made up. But obviously, it is based on a true account for all intents and purposes. So first of all, what works with this movie? I actually thought Val Kilmer, playing an Irishman, actually did a pretty good job here. Yeah, I mean, if you're Irish, I suppose you could say his accent may be a little broad. But to be honest with you, I actually thought he did an all right job of not making it sound too over the top here. And it gives like a... I don't know, his character is just very enthusiastic about his job and he's going to get back to his family and his love for Africa. And he has this kind of like encyclopedic knowledge about the African animals and stuff like that. And I just thought it was, he was quite a kind of likeable character. And there's some quite funny one-liners that he has as well. The movie, because Africa, is this vast kind of continent with lots of kind of like, plains of grasslands and things like this. The movie does a sensible thing of having lots of kind of like wide-angle shots and things like this, so you can see, obviously all the kind of the scenery and what's going on. And there are some genuinely effective scenes here where you'll see, for example, the grass just moving, and something's in there, and it will evoke the imagery of Jaws, where something is under the surface, but you can't quite see it. And you might see a flash of a tail here and there, or the kind of the back of the line, things like that. But it does evoke images of Jaws because it's filmed in a very kind of similar way. And the movie does have a high body count with these kind of lions killing and maiming loads of people through the kind of the movie. And there are some good set pieces in regards to how these kind of lions were taken down and things like this, and some of the kind of the things that happened here. For example, Val Kilmer's character made this kind of trap to try and trap one of the lions in there, and this did actually happen, and he managed to trap one of the lions in there, but it still managed to kind of escape, and even though it seemed like pretty infallible, to be honest. So some real interesting stuff here. And there's some big scale stuff. The construction of this railway, hundreds of extras, gives this movie a somewhat of an epic feel. And it's I gotta say, I think the acting for the most part is pretty good, for the most part, which leads me into Michael Douglas. Now, I like Michael Douglas. He is not one of my favourite actors, but he's a great actor, and he's been in many good movies. But in this movie, he is just way too hammy. Because this character isn't necessarily based on, apparently it's based on a big game hunter, but not anyone who was involved in the real story. but his character just seems very cartoony and kind of contrived. I mean, it was Michael Douglas's character, and there's going to be a little bit of a spoiler here. He doesn't actually show up to the movie until about the halfway mark, and you get the impression that the only reason that he was introduced was so he could die to then make Val Kilmer look more heroic at the end. And that's exactly what happens. So, I don't know, his character and the choices that were made in regards to his character seemed contrived to begin with. And I really didn't like Michael Douglas's portrayal, to be honest with you. It just seemed overly hammy. The movie also slows down a little bit, you know, from time to time. And I think the nearest comparison movie is Jaws, because it's obviously a kind of a similar story in a lot of ways. But the thing is that Jaws had these very relatable and interesting characters. And although as much as I like Val Kilmer's portrayal here, he doesn't really have anyone to kind of like really bounce against, if that makes sense. I mean, like I say, Michael Douglas's character just seems like a buffoonish, well, not buffoonish, he seems very competent in his job, but he just seems like a cartoon character, and that's really the only person who is really to his equal. Everyone else is just smaller parts and things like this. There are a couple of minor characters that will get a bit of screen time, but nonetheless, you don't get quite as much kind of interplay here. And, you know, even you compare like Val Kilmer's character to Chief Brody in Jaws, and there's no real comparison, unfortunately. Now, as I said, the movie, I think, is maybe a tad overlong, and it didn't quite need to be quite as overblown as it maybe is. But it's still a well-constructed movie, and the line attacks are very good. They use real lines in this movie. Apparently, they're the same lines that were also in the movie George of the Jungle, with very little kind of, you know, animatronic effects and stuff like that. But they do a good job, I feel, on the animal attacks, and they're quite bloody and gruesome. So I think this movie is enjoyable, but it's by no means a classic. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.